Hello, everyone, and welcome to this another episode of 2D Fundamentals. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we took a look at two of the 12 principles. We took a look at exaggeration as well as squash and stretch. In today's episode, guys, I'd like to finish off the 12 principles. So we're going to be kind of looking at these in a little bit more hurried fashion. We still have 5 principles to go, but because the way my real life class is working, the students are moving on to simple character work. So I kind of need to get these into a single video. So today we're going to be looking at anticipation, staging, secondary action, solid drawing, and appeal. All right, let's get started. Okay, guys, so today we're going to take a look at a number of the 12 principles, 5 to be exact, and I know that's a lot. Some of these we're just going to simply discuss, and I will give you guys examples. Maybe I'll find some pictures, something like that online to kind of support what I'm talking about. Other ones we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So the 5 principles we're going to take a look at today are anticipation, staging, secondary action, solid drawing, and appeal. And we're going to start off with appeal. I think that's probably the easiest one to go through. Appeal is about the 12th principle. It's actually principle number 12, appeal. And it's about creating characters that are likable. All right. And that doesn't necessarily mean you are creating attractive or handsome or, beautiful characters. What it actually means is that these characters are in some way relatable, they are in some way likable, and your audience can look at them and get involved in their lives. You want your audience to take a look at the characters you design and say, yes, I like this particular character appeals to me in some way, and I want to know more about them. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean a complex character. You can have an appealing, simplistic character, just a ball with a tail, for example. But it's all about making sure that it is appealing to your audience so that your audience wants to know more about that particular character. Okay, so now let's take a look at principle number 11, solid drawing. And lots of people hear solid drawing and they think right away this has nothing to do with 3D animation. They tune it out. And that's not true at all. All 12 principles apply to both 2D and 3D. We're doing 2D fundamentals here, but these ideas will apply equally to both 2D and 3D. And the original concept behind solid drawing was that the animator understood three-dimensional space, so volume and weight and three-dimensional space, and it goes a long way. So first of all, if you have a character, let's go back and take a look at one of the earlier principles, squash and stretch, we talked about last week. In squash and stretch, we stretch the character in one dimension, and it's very important that when you stretch the character in one dimension, that in the other dimensions, this character is scaled. It's scaled downwards. It's squashed in another direction. What that does is it ensures that the character you've drawn is maintaining its volume over the squash and the stretch. If you don't do that, if you don't have a counter squash to the stretch you're building, then your character will look like it is growing larger rather than simply stretching. It'll look like it's actually physically getting bigger. So volume control is very important when we're talking about solid drawing. We want our character to look like it's the same character regardless of what we've done to it. If we've stretched it in some way, we want to make sure that our volume is controlled and our character still looks like the same character, not a larger version of it as we stretch it bigger. So that actually brings us to another point. There's something that's called being on model or off model. And a character that changes in some way so it no longer looks like the original character is called off model. And you want to avoid that. Obviously, as we are going through and we are creating our animation, if we're creating an animation about a particular character, we want to make sure that our audience understands that that particular character is the same character throughout the entire animation. All right? So that's where solid drawing comes in as far as 2D is concerned. As far as 3D is concerned, I like to take a look at solid drawing in the same way as far as volume control. But to me, it's also about solid rigging. All right, solid rigging in a 3D character means that your character is able to do the things that you want it to do. If you've built a proper control structure in 3D, your character can do all of the actions that you want it to be able to do without forcing it in some way that the rig was not designed to do. And if we take a look, there's lots of examples that you'll see, especially if you're a new animator or a new rigger and you've gone through and you've designed yourself a character. And when you notice that when you rotate the arm in some way, for example, and it's very common in the arms and the legs, but you rotate the arm in some way, their hand in some way, and it twists on itself. It gets really skinny and it twists on itself. You lose a volume as this thing, it's called candy wrapping or candy wrapper. It twists around itself, and that to me is the concept of solid drawing in a 3D environment. Okay, proper rigging will help you avoid that loss of volume through candy wrapping or through twisting. Proper rigging will take care of allowing you to do the actions that you want to do in 3D space. So for me, principle number 11, solid drawing when it comes to 3D is still about volume control, right? If you have a stretch in one way, you want to have a squash in the other, but it goes farther than that, and it talks about the idea of proper rigging. Okay, let's take a look now at secondary action. So a lot of animators confuse the concepts of secondary action with the concepts of follow through and overlapping action. Secondary action is principle number 8. And like I said, a lot of people confuse the two concepts, secondary action and follow through and overlapping action. Secondary action is about amplifying or exaggerating or supporting a primary action within your animation. You are trying to tell people some story, and you have a primary way of doing that. You have some kind of primary action. Let's take a look at someone who is upset. We're taking a look at a character who's upset, and this person is in an argument with someone else. So you have a character on the screen and they're in an argument. The primary action of the argument is the character shouting, let's say, or shouting or speaking verbally in some manner. And you can hear by the verbiage, by the way that the tone of their voice and this kind of thing, that this character is upset. That is the primary action. Okay, that's the primary action. A secondary action that would support that primary action, as an example, would be the character slamming their hand down on a table, or stomping their foot, or waggling their finger in someone else's face. All of these are secondary actions that support the primary action. Okay, so that's what it's about. It's about enhancing or exaggerating the feeling or the idea of a primary action. Someone who's really excited, they can be really excited and say yippee, and that's all they say is yippee, and they've said yippee, obviously they're excited. But if that same person says yippee and they have this big jump in the air, then you know that that secondary action, the yippee, the little tiny yippee motion is the primary action, but that big jump in the air, that secondary action that supports the primary action, goes a long way in selling the idea that you are trying to get across. Okay, that is principle number 8, secondary action. So let's take a look at principle number 3, staging. And principle number 3, staging, is a very, very important one, particularly if you're trying to tell a story, particularly if you're trying to get a point across through your animation. And that's the whole point of animating, right? You're trying to tell a story, you're trying to tell something to your viewer, you want them to notice something particular. The idea of staging is about creating a shot or a scene or an environment in which your story is very clearly told. You can create poor staging by creating competing elements. So for example, if we have a ball bouncing on one side, if we just take a really simple example, we've got a ball bouncing up and down in a cycle on one side, and on the other side of the screen at the same time, you have a ball that goes through its anticipatory action, which we'll discuss in 1 second, an anticipatory action, and then leaps in the air. Now, at that moment, where is your audience looking? What are they trying to see? What do you want them to look at? Did you want them to look at the ball bouncing up and down? Did you want them to see the ball anticipating and then jumping in the air? What was the most important action? What were you trying to tell them? Through proper staging, you will have your audience looking in the direction that you want them to look and understanding exactly what you're trying to see in your animation. That is the entire point of your animation. You are trying to say something. So by proper staging, you can go through and ensure that your audience is looking in the direction you want them to look and seeing the things that you want them to see. There's a lot of different ways to go about staging. Right? If you've got yourself a simple locked off camera, meaning your camera never moves and you've got a single scene, that's all you've ever got, then timing will go a long way in ensuring your audience is looking where you want them to look. If a ball is bouncing up and down and then stops and then another ball goes through an anticipatory action and then jumps, your audience's view will switch from the constant motion. Whenever it stops, it'll switch to the new motion that it's catching, and the audience will then watch that action. Okay, so in the exact same example that we looked at before, instead of having everything occurring at the same time, with proper timing, you can have your audience looking in the direction you want them to look and seeing what you want them to see. Now, staging goes a lot farther than that, because obviously if you don't have a locked off camera, then you can utilize the camera to ensure that your audience is seeing exactly what you want them to see through proper composition, through compositional guidelines in your framing, through different types of framing. So you maybe have a close-up in one area to ensure your audience is seeing what you want them to notice. So for example, if you've got a character who's walking towards a door and they reach towards the door, and then you do a close-up on the handle of the door and the character moves the handle, maybe you'll notice something in particular about their fingers. Or let's say the character is walking towards a door and it's got a keypad on it, and then we get a close-up. So we have a long shot of the character walking towards the door, then we have a close-up of the character punching in the keypad. Then it tells us a lot about that character. That character was obviously going somewhere. They knew where they were going. They knew exactly what they were doing and how to get in. They knew the combination. And now, depending on how the close-ups worked, we as an audience also know the combination. All right, so being able to stage everything properly goes a long way, and that could be an entire course onto itself. We could be doing an entire course strictly on compositional guidelines, on an entire full-fledged cinematic degree, if you wanted to go through and get proper staging. All right, guys, so the final one we're going to take a look at today is anticipation. So the final principle we're going to take a look at is principle number 2, anticipation. And for me, it's actually a pretty big one. It's a pretty big one. Anticipation goes a long way in making your animations appear real. It aids in timing, it aids in staging, it aids in a lot of things. All right? And basically what anticipation is it's a move or an action that prepares your viewer for an upcoming action. All right, so this could be a rabbit hole, and lots of times it is. Lots of people get involved and they say, "Oh, I need an anticipatory move to my anticipation to my actual move," and they can keep going backwards and backwards and backwards, and that is perfectly fine. You don't want to have this flip-flopping action that keeps going backwards and backwards and backwards until you have your final move. But at least one single anticipatory move is required before you have anything large happen. So, in an example of a ball jumping as opposed to a ball bouncing. When a ball is bouncing, the ball is dropped. It goes through its slow out until it hits the ground, where it squashes, and then it stretches out of its bounce and back up into a slow in to its apex. All right. If we take a look, that's a cycle, a ball bounce cycle. If we take a look at a ball jumping. Right, so now the ball is no longer being drawn through gravity. It's actually jumping on its own by its own power. Whenever this ball jumps, it's going to go through an anticipatory move. All right, it's going to move down. It's going to squash down in advance of its jump. It's going to squash down, and after it squashes down, there's going to be a hold for a beat or two. A beat is a non-technical term that animators use to describe a period of time that allows their viewers to understand what they were seeing. Okay, so our ball will squash down in this anticipation move. It's in the opposite direction to the direction it's going to travel. So in this case, my ball squashes down. It then leaps into the air. It goes through its regular leap where it stretches out, moves into an apex, and then falls back down and lands. Okay, it goes through a settle afterwards. That anticipation move that you are seeing, that anticipation move prepares our viewer for what's to come. The same thing can be true, let's say, of a character who wants to pull something from their pocket. If you have a character and you want them to pull something out of their pocket and you want this to be something that the audience notices and sees, you will make an anticipatory move where your hand will draw up. It'll hold for a beat, so our audience says, "What? That character is moving. I am now looking in the right spot. It's aiding with staging. I'm looking where I want to, where this animator wants me to look." The character will hold their hand up and then plunge their hand into their pocket. So it's an upward move before a downward move into their pocket. Afterwards, there'll be a hold where the character is fumbling in his pocket, and then there'll be a move outwards once again where the character brandishes whatever it is they're pulling out of their pocket, and there'll be a hold at that point in time. That is proper staging through the use of anticipation. All right, guys, so that's the general idea behind anticipation. A move or an anticipatory move that prepares our viewer for an upcoming action. The larger the upcoming action, the larger the anticipation. All right, so if you've got a move that's really big, you want to have a fairly large anticipation move as well. It makes your actions seem far more realistic. It allows us to tell our story better. Anticipation allows us to tell our story better because our audience is looking precisely where we want them to look. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. That brings us to the end of our 12 principles. That is all of our 12 principles in a few videos. Maybe not enough, to be honest. The 12 principles go a long way in making your animation look awesome. And learning to apply those 12 principles automatically will help your animation improve. All right. After you understand the 12 principles and you move on to a different form of animation, understanding when to break those 12 principles is equally important. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I understand this kind of stuff isn't for everybody. I kind of took a chance with it on my channel. I really hope that you did enjoy the idea of the 12 principles. We're going to be looking in this particular series at a few more ideas. We'll take a look at anticipation within spine. And I also want to take a look at creating a character in spine in this particular series before we end. All right, guys? Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.